Go ahead and subscribe, please.
In the winter of 1981, in a remote wooded area of Bossier Parish, Louisiana, a father and his two children made a horrifying discovery that would haunt them for decades. On January 28th, John Chesson Jr., a local hunter, was walking through thick brush off a logging road with his 13-year-old daughter Frances and his younger son. It was a cold, quiet morning, the kind where sound doesn't carry far. As the kids pushed through the undergrowth, they suddenly felt their feet sink into something soft, something unnatural. At first, they thought it was mud, but when they looked down, they realized with terror that they were standing on a human body. The remains were badly decomposed, lying face down in the dirt. The young girl had been brutally murdered, stabbed at least 9 times in the back and chest. Nearby, stuck blade first into the soil, was a large knife, believed by investigators to be the murder weapon. There was no purse, no identification, no jewelry that could offer even the smallest clue about who she was. To the authorities, she became known simply as Bossier Doe, or Bossier Parish Jane Doe. The victim was estimated to be a white female, possibly with some Native American ancestry, between 15 and 21 years old. She stood about 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed between 125 and 140 pounds. Her hair was blonde, straight, and fell to her shoulders. Decomposition had advanced too far to determine her eye color. One small detail stood out. Her fingernails were painted red, a sign that even in whatever difficult circumstances she had been living, she still cared about her appearance. Another unusual feature made future identification even harder. She had once worn orthodontic braces, but the metal brackets had been removed in a crude, non-professional way. Later, it would be confirmed that she had pulled the braces out herself, a painful and desperate act that spoke to the kind of life she may have been leading. She was fully dressed when found. Blue jeans, a leather belt with a distinctive buffalo nickel buckle, a long-sleeved white sweater with horizontal stripes in pink, yellow, and blue, and a beige hooded jacket. Inside several of these items of clothing, names had been written in marker: Michael, David, Risha. These names suggested she may have been in foster care, a group home, or some kind of institutional or shared living situation. Young people in such environments often label their clothes to avoid mix-ups. It painted a picture of a vulnerable teenager, possibly a runaway, far from home and without protection. The autopsy confirmed the brutality of the attack. She had been stabbed multiple times, with wounds penetrating her back and chest. Her arms were too decomposed to determine if she had defensive wounds, meaning investigators couldn't say for certain whether she had fought back. It was also unclear whether she had been killed right there in the woods or murdered elsewhere and dumped. All they knew was that she had likely died in late December 1980, 4 to 6 weeks before her body was found. The knife found at the scene was collected as evidence. Detectives hoped it might hold fingerprints, blood traces, or manufacture markings that could be traced. But in 1981, forensic technology was limited. Fingerprints taken from the remains failed due to decomposition. Dental impressions and hair samples were preserved in case future methods could help, but DNA profiling didn't yet exist. Police worked the case hard in the beginning. They canvassed the remote area for witnesses, but it was so isolated that few people ever passed through. No one reported seeing a struggle, hearing screams, or noticing suspicious vehicles around the estimated time of death. Databases of missing and runaway teens were checked across the country, but no match emerged. Appeals were made to the public through newspapers and television, but no one came forward with information. Then, in 1983, a potential breakthrough appeared in the form of one of America's most notorious serial killers, Henry Lee Lucas. Arrested in Texas, Lucas began confessing to hundreds of murders across the country, earning him the nickname the Confession Killer. When shown details of the Bossier Doe case, he claimed responsibility, describing how he had stabbed a young girl to death. For a brief moment, authorities thought the case might be solved. But when investigators checked his timeline, they found solid evidence that Lucas had been in Florida at the time of the murder. His confession was false, just another lie to inflate his body count and keep himself in the spotlight. The lead collapsed, and the case went cold.
Over the years, efforts continued to identify the young woman. In the late 1980s, forensic artists created a three-dimensional clay reconstruction of what her face might have looked like. Photographs of the bust were distributed widely through media outlets, but no one recognized her. In 2000, as digital technology improved, a new, more lifelike composite sketch was produced and circulated again. Still, silence. Then, in 2005, tragedy struck the investigation a second time. A fire broke out at the law enforcement storage facility where evidence from the case was kept. Nearly everything was destroyed: the knife, the clothing, biological samples. Whatever physical links might have existed to a killer were gone forever. Even if a suspect were found years later, proving the case beyond reasonable doubt would be nearly impossible. But the story doesn't end in despair. Far away in Michigan, a woman named Jeannie Phelps had never stopped searching for her older sister, Carol Ann Cole. Carol was born on November 5, 1963, in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Her childhood was unstable. Her parents divorced, and the family moved frequently. For a time, she lived with her grandmother in Michigan, but later moved to Texas with her mother, Sue. Carol struggled as a teenager. She ran away several times, got into minor trouble, and eventually ended up in Louisiana. Her last phone calls home were from the Shreveport area, where she said she was staying with friends and babysitting to earn money. Then, late in 1980, contact stopped completely. Jeannie filed a missing persons report, but with no strong leads and Carol being a 17-year-old runaway, the case didn't receive much attention. Over the decades, Jeannie and a close family friend named Patty Thorington refused to give up. In the early days of the internet, they began posting on missing persons forums. When Craigslist emerged, they placed countless ads with Carol's photo and details, often titled, "Help Bring Carol Home." Patty estimates she sent nearly 100 such messages over the years, hoping someone, somewhere, would recognize her friend. In early 2015, more than 34 years after the body was found, the Bossier Parish Sheriff's Office tried something innovative. Cold case detective Lieutenant Shannon Mack created a Facebook page for the still unidentified victim. The profile picture was the latest reconstruction of Bossier Doe's face. Posts were written as if the Jane Doe herself was speaking, sharing details of her clothing, the location where she was found, and pleading for help in discovering her name. The page quickly gained attention. Hundreds of people friended it, shared posts, and spread the word across state lines. One of those people was Linda Erickson, a 911 dispatcher in Louisiana. In February 2015, she was homesick, lying on the couch and scrolling through Facebook when she landed on the Bossier Doe page. Something about the reconstructed face struck her as familiar. Just hours earlier, while browsing Craigslist to pass the time, she had seen one of Patty's ads looking for Carol Ann Cole. It included a clear photograph of a smiling teenage girl from 1980. Linda pulled up both images side by side. The resemblance was strong. The timelines lined up perfectly. Carol missing in late 1980 from the Shreveport area, the body found weeks later nearby. She immediately contacted the sheriff's office with the tip. Within days, detectives reached out to Carol's family. They located her mother Sue in Texas and her father and sister Jeannie in Michigan. DNA samples were collected and compared. In March 2015, the results came back, a positive match. After 34 years, Bossier Doe finally had a name, Carol Ann Cole. For the family, the news brought a complicated mix of emotions. Jeannie told reporters there was relief in finally having answers, but the pain of knowing how Carol died was overwhelming. There are still so many questions. Why? Who? How? She said.
Her mother, Sue, speaking from Texas, admitted she had long suspected the worst. "I kind of knew in my heart all along that she was probably dead," she said. "I'm just glad we got closure." With the victim's identity restored, the investigation shifted focus. This was no longer just an unidentified homicide. It was now a hunt for Carol Ann Cole's killer. And almost immediately, one name rose to the top of the suspect list, the man who had discovered her body, John Alvin Chesson, Jr. In 2015, shortly after the identification was made public, Chesson's daughter, Frances, came forward with a chilling story. At the time of the discovery, she was 13 years old and one of the children present. Now an adult, she told investigators that she believed her own father had murdered Carol. According to Frances, in late 1980, her father, known to be volatile and abusive, picked up a teenage hitchhiker on the road. That girl was Carol Ann Cole. He brought her home and she stayed with the family for about a week. Carol even shared Frances's bed during that time. Then one day, Frances came home from school to find Carol gone. Her father offered no explanation, and given his violent temper, Frances was too afraid to ask. Not long after Carol disappeared, John did something completely out of character. He announced he was taking the kids hunting, the first and only time he ever did so. He drove them to a remote area and told them to walk ahead down a specific path. Moments later, they stumbled onto the decomposed body. Frances now believes the entire trip was staged. Her father, she says, deliberately led them to the remains so that he would appear to be an innocent discoverer rather than the killer. She also claimed to recognize the knife found at the scene as the same one her father had once held to her throat during a rage. John Chesson was no stranger to violent crime. In 1997, he stabbed his ex-mother-in-law to death in a domestic dispute. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, where he remained in 2015 when these allegations surfaced. Detectives took Frances's statement seriously. They interviewed Chesson multiple times in prison and re-examined old records. The circumstantial case appeared strong. He had opportunity, Carol stayed in his home, motive, unknown but his history of violence, and the suspicious circumstances of the discovery. But there was an insurmountable obstacle. The 2005 evidence fire had destroyed everything physical. No knife to test for DNA or fingerprints, no clothing for fiber comparison, no biological material. Without forensic evidence, prosecutors could not build a case strong enough for charges. John Chesson died in prison sometime between 2016 and 2017. No charges were ever filed in Carol's death. The case remains officially unsolved. Today, Carol Ann Cole rests in a cemetery in Michigan, buried with a proper headstone that acknowledges her long journey from anonymity, known as Bossier Doe 1981 to 2015. Her family continues to seek full justice, though they know it may never come. This case stands as one of the most remarkable examples of how persistence, coincidence, and modern tools like social media can solve decades-old mysteries of identity, even if the full truth about a killer remains just out of reach. It is a story of loss, resilience, and the enduring hope that one day every victim will be known and every wrong made right.